"You have got to be joking," my mom said, her voice laced with a sharpness that could slice through steel. "Lily is always the one thinking about us. Why would you even try to take that away from her?" I sat frozen, my lips slightly parted in disbelief. Meanwhile, Lily, perched confidently at the edge of the couch, flashed me a smug little smile that made my stomach twist into knots. "My name is Olivia Brooks. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a marketing consultant. To most people, I'm the dependable, practical one, the one who gets things done without expecting recognition. That's exactly why, a few months ago, I made the decision to leave $10,000 in my parents' mailbox as an anonymous gift, just to lighten their financial burden. The only person I confided in was my younger sister, Lily, a struggling artist who had always found herself at the center of attention. Never in my wildest imagination did I think she would turn around and take credit for it, basking in the admiration of my parents and everyone else. At first, I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't worth a confrontation, and maybe, just maybe, Lily would eventually come clean. But as weeks passed, then months, the lie only grew stronger. Every family dinner became an echo chamber of my parents praising her generosity, talking about how fortunate they were to have a daughter like her. With every word of admiration they lavished on her, my frustration deepened. It wasn't about the acknowledgement. I never wanted recognition. What made my blood boil was that she let them believe something that wasn't true, while I sat there, swallowing my anger. The most infuriating part? I had no way to prove it. I hadn't considered that possibility when I left the money. No note. No cameras. No traceable transactions. Just an envelope filled with $10,000 in cash, placed in their mailbox. It was meant to be anonymous. I never thought I'd have to prove it was me. So when I finally reached my breaking point at Sunday dinner and blurted out, "Actually, I was the one who left the money," the room fell into an eerie silence. Every set of eyes locked onto me, filled with disbelief. Lily, of course, played her part flawlessly. She didn't look guilty, she looked stunned, as though she were the one being accused of something outrageous. My mom was the first to react, her tone sharp with disbelief. "Olivia, don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "Why would you say something like that? We all know Lily gave us that money. She's always been so considerate, and we are so grateful for what she's done." My dad nodded in agreement, his expression one of utter skepticism. "There's no reason to turn this into some kind of competition," he added, his voice carrying a disappointing sense of dismissal. "And Lily? She delivered her performance with precision." Her voice trembled just enough to sound wounded. "I can't believe you would do this, Olivia," she said, shaking her head. "I know things have been tense between us, but this? Really?" She cast a quick, desperate glance at our parents, and as expected, they were right there, ready to comfort her while I sat there in stunned disbelief. It wasn't just that she had lied. She was doubling down on it, and my parents were eating it up without hesitation. I clenched my fists beneath the table, forcing myself to keep my voice steady. "This isn't about competing," I said, my gaze locked on hers. "I just want the truth to come out. I was the one who left the money in the mailbox. You're taking credit for something that wasn't yours to begin with, and that's not right." Lily let out a small, disbelieving laugh, shaking her head as though she pitied me. "Olivia, you don't even have proof," she said, her voice soft but tinged with condescension. "Why would you leave cash like that? That doesn't even sound like something you'd do. Honestly, it feels like you're just trying to ruin this for me because you're jealous." The accusation stung. Worse, I could see my mother's frown deepening, as if Lily had made a valid point. That was when I realized the truth. No matter what I said, they wouldn't believe me. They were too wrapped up in their perception of her, too convinced of the story they wanted to believe. My mother let out a heavy sigh, shaking her head as though she were scolding a child for throwing a tantrum. "Olivia, this jealousy is getting out of hand. Lily has always been so thoughtful, and instead of appreciating what she's done for us, you're trying to tear her down? This is really disappointing." My dad's voice followed, just as patronizing. "We love you, Olivia, even if you didn't give us the money. You don't have to compete with your sister for our attention. My dad offered me a pitying smile, as if he was doing me a favor by forgiving me for something I hadn't even done. Across from me, Lily sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, the perfect picture of innocence, yet there was something smug in the way she held herself. The entire situation felt surreal, like I had been thrown into a scripted drama where the truth was irrelevant. I couldn't take it anymore. The disbelief. The condescension. The way Lily looked at me like she had already won. I'd had enough. Pushing my chair back, I stood abruptly, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. My hands trembled at my sides, but I refused to let them see how much this was getting to me. I swept my gaze over all three of them, my voice tight with frustration. "You know what? This is beyond ridiculous," I said, my words cutting through the tense silence. "You're so busy showering Lily with praise that you can't even consider the possibility that she's lying to you. But one day, the truth will come out. And when it does, it'll be too late." I turned to face Lily directly. She didn't flinch, just kept up that carefully measured expression of wounded innocence. "And you," I continued, my voice unwavering as I pointed a finger at her. "One day, you'll regret this. Maybe not now, but when you need someone to trust, when you need someone to have your back, you'll realize you burned the only bridge that mattered." I didn't wait for their reactions. I grabbed my things and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I refused to sit there and let them cast me as the jealous liar any longer. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was undeniable. My relationship with my parents became distant and cold. The usual daily texts turned into occasional, impersonal messages. Phone calls grew shorter, strained with a politeness that felt forced. When we did speak, it was as if we were strangers navigating small talk rather than family. And Lily? She didn't reach out at all. Not once. I told myself I didn't care, that I didn't want to hear from her anyway. Family gatherings became something I avoided entirely. I always had an excuse: work, travel, anything that kept me from sitting at a table with them, pretending like nothing had happened. The idea of being in the Olivier room as Lily, watching her continue the charade, made my stomach turn. The only person I could truly rely on was my best friend, Sienna. One night, curled up in her apartment with a bottle of wine between us, I finally let everything spill out. "I don't know what hurts more," I admitted, my voice cracking. "That Lily did this to me, or that my parents took her side without a second thought." Sienna didn't interrupt. She just listened, nodding with that quiet understanding she always had when I needed her most. It's like all the years I spent being the responsible one, the good daughter, didn't mean anything. No matter what, they'll always choose her. Sienna reached across the couch and squeezed my hand. "You don't deserve this, Olivia." "None of it," she said firmly. "You did something selfless and they couldn't see it. That's on them, not you." Her words helped, at least in the moment. But the ache in my chest remained. A few months later, hoping for some comfort away from the tension with my parents and Lily, I decided to visit my grandparents. I expected warmth, a safe place where I wouldn't have to defend myself. Instead, the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. The usual sense of welcome was missing. Conversations felt stilted, their smiles a little too forced. And then, as I settled onto the couch, I overheard a hushed voice behind me. "It's just sad, isn't it?" my Aunt Margaret murmured to one of my cousins. "You'd think Olivia could have been happy for her sister instead of trying to cause trouble." My stomach plummeted. I turned slightly, catching Margaret's gaze just as she quickly looked away, pretending she hadn't just said something loud enough for me to hear. My grandmother, sensing the tension, stepped in, attempting to smooth things over in the only way she knew how. She handed me a plate of cookies, as if sugar and warmth could somehow erase what had just happened. "You know, sweetie," she said gently, "Lily has been so wonderful to your parents. It's really inspiring how much she stepped up for them." I felt my chest tighten. Lily had gone out of her way to spread her lie, ensuring that even the extended family saw me as the problem. She hadn't just stolen credit, she had rewritten the entire story, making me the villain. I stayed just long enough to be polite, but by the time I left, I could barely swallow the lump in my throat. Leaving my grandparents' house that day felt heavier than I had expected. The whispers, the looks, the words I wasn't meant to hear, they all played on repeat in my mind, each one a fresh cut. It wasn't just the unfairness of it all. It was the betrayal. Lily had tainted how my own family saw me, turning me into some bitter, jealous troublemaker in their eyes. And what stung the most was knowing they had believed her without hesitation. By the time I got home, I didn't go inside right away. Instead, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel and staring into nothing. The worst part wasn't just that my family believed Lily's lies, it was knowing that, no matter what I said, their minds were already made up. Sitting in my car, I forced myself to accept the cold, bitter truth. There was nothing I could do to prove my side of the story. I had been so intent on making the gift anonymous that I hadn't left a single shred of evidence. No receipts. No bank transfers. No note. Just an envelope stuffed with $10,000 in cash dropped into their mailbox. And since everyone had chosen to believe Lily, what options did I have? If my own parents didn't trust me, what chance did I have with the rest of the family? It felt like I was screaming into a void, only for my voice to be swallowed whole, unheard and unacknowledged. The reality was crushingly simple. Nothing I said or did would change their perception of me. So what now? I could walk away and try to rebuild my life without their approval, but that thought left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't enough. I didn't just want to move on, I wanted justice. I wanted them to know who I really was, not the version Lily had painted in their minds. But how? What miracle would it take to turn the tables? I had no evidence. No proof. Just months of silence, of biting my tongue while Lily basked in the lie. Something had to give. I just didn't know when or how. But deep down, I held on to the fragile hope that one day, something would finally expose Lily for who she really was. Lost in my spiraling thoughts, I barely registered the vibration of my phone on the passenger seat. Absent-mindedly, I reached for it, expecting some spam notification or a generic update. But when I glanced at the screen, my breath hitched. A message from Lily. "Hey, Olivia. I really need to talk to you. It's important." I stared at the words, emotions clashing between anger, suspicion, and curiosity. Lily hadn't reached out to me in months. Not once. And now, out of nowhere, she suddenly needed to talk? The timing felt almost too perfect. But deep in my gut, I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't good. My thumb hovered over the screen, instinct urging me to reply immediately, to demand to know what she wanted. But then I stopped myself. Lily had spent months weaving her story, letting everyone believe I was the jealous, bitter sister. She could wait. I set my phone down and decided that, for once, I wouldn't let her urgency dictate my response. Whatever was so important, she'd have to sit with it until I was ready. After a restless night spent tossing and turning, I finally responded the next morning. "What's so important, Lily? Make it quick." No pleasantries. No warmth. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of thinking I was eager to hear from her. Her reply came almost instantly, like she'd been waiting for me to break the silence. "Can I come over? I really need your help, Olivia. I'm in a tough spot." Something about the wording made me pause. Lily never asked for help. She expected things, manipulated her way into getting what she wanted, but outright admitting she needed something? That wasn't like her. I hesitated before typing back. What kind of help are we talking about? I wasn't going to let her waltz in and dump her problems on me without context. If she thought she could manipulate me into another mess, she was sorely mistaken. Her next message came just as quickly. "I'm struggling financially. I can't keep up with everything, and I don't know where else to turn. Please, Olivia, just hear me out." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh, shaking my head at the sheer irony of it all. Lily, the golden child, the beloved, the selfless daughter who could do no wrong, was now coming to me for help. The Olivia sister who had stolen my generosity, twisted the truth, and ruined my reputation. And now she was desperate enough to ask me for a favor? Every part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her deal with whatever mess she had created. But another part, the one that still wanted justice, knew this might be exactly the opportunity I'd been waiting for. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I finally typed out my response. Fine. Come over tomorrow. We'll talk. If Lily wanted my help, she wasn't going to get it on her terms. This time, things would be different. The next afternoon, she showed up at my door, and for once, she didn't have the usual air of confidence wrapped around her like armor. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her complexion pale and tired, and she wore an old hoodie I hadn't seen in years, one that used to belong to me. For a fleeting moment, something inside me wavered. But then reality snapped back into focus. I knew why she was here. I didn't know where else to go, she murmured as I stepped aside to let her in. She perched at the edge of my couch, fidgeting with her hands, avoiding my gaze. The nervous energy radiating off her was almost foreign. This wasn't the Olivia sister who had sat smugly in front of our parents, soaking in their praise. Things have been bad, Olivia, she admitted, barely above a whisper. I'm drowning in bills. My rent is overdue, my credit cards are maxed out, and I barely have enough left for groceries. Her voice cracked. I don't know what else to do. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed over my chest, keeping my voice measured. So, what you're really saying is, you need money. She winced at my bluntness, but didn't argue. After everything you pulled, you expect me to bail you out? The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy. Lily swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. I've already asked everyone else, she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. Friends, acquaintances, anyone who might help. I didn't want to involve Mom and Dad, and, well, after everything that happened, I couldn't exactly turn to the rest of the family. She trailed off, staring down at her hands. I arched an eyebrow. After what, exactly? After you spent months lying to them? After you made sure they saw me as the problem? She flinched but didn't refute it. So let me get this straight, I said, my tone dripping with disbelief. You ran out of options, and now, as a last resort, you're coming to me? The Olivia sister you stabbed in the back. She hesitated before giving a small, reluctant nod. I know I don't deserve it, she admitted, voice trembling. But I had no one else to turn to. Please, Olivia. For a long moment, I just stared at her. A part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to let her sit with the consequences of her own choices. But another part of me saw something else, an opportunity. A way to finally turn things around. I took a deep breath, shaking my head. No, Lily, I said, my voice firm. Her head shot up, eyes widening in surprise. I'm not giving you money. Not after everything you've done. She looked like she might cry. Olivia, please, she whispered, desperation seeping into every word. If I had any other choice, I wouldn't be here. I need your help. I'm sure you do, I said coolly. But you made your bed, Lily. You lied to our family, you let them believe the worst about me, and now you expect me to fix things for you. I scoffed. That's not happening. For the first time in months, I felt no guilt. No doubt. Just clarity. Lily held my gaze for a few seconds before the weight of my refusal settled over her. Her shoulders slumped, fingers clutching the strap of her bag with trembling hands. I get it, she murmured, her voice hollow. I screwed up, and I don't deserve your help. She exhaled shakily. I didn't know where else to go. She paused at the door, turning back for one last glance. Her eyes were red-rimmed, filled with something I couldn't quite place. I'm sorry, Olivia. For everything, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. Then, before I could even think of how to respond, she opened the door and slipped out, shutting it softly behind her. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space she left behind. A strange mix of emotions swirled inside me, relief, exhaustion, maybe even a tinge of sadness. But one thing was certain. I had done the right thing. A few days later, I was in the kitchen, halfway through making coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. Glancing at the screen, I frowned. My dad's name flashed across it. He rarely called me directly, which meant this wasn't just a casual check-in. A flicker of unease settled in my chest as I answered. Hey, Dad, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Olivia, he began, his voice unusually hesitant. Your mom and I were wondering if you'd come to dinner this Friday. I frowned, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. Dinner? Lily's asked to see us all, he continued. She says it's important. Your mom and I think it would mean a lot if you were there. I froze, my mind racing. Lily? Important? This wasn't just a family get-together. Did she say what it's about? I asked cautiously. No, my dad admitted. Just that it's something she needs to do in person. Please, Olivia, it would mean a lot to all of us. My dad's voice was steady, but I could hear the unspoken plea beneath his words. I hesitated, the weight of everything still fresh in my mind. But after a brief pause, I exhaled sharply and gave in. All right, I'll be there, I said, though deep down, I was already bracing myself for whatever this was about. Friday evening, I pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My stomach churned, the unease settling in deeper the longer I sat there. Whatever Lily had planned, this wasn't going to be an ordinary family dinner. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, then grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car. The familiar scent of my mom's pot roast drifted from the house, something that usually brought comfort. Tonight, however, it only made my stomach twist further. Walking inside, I was met with an odd kind of quiet. As I stepped into the dining room, my parents, grandparents, and Lily were already seated around the table. My grandparents greeted me with warm smiles, but the air was thick with tension. Lily, sitting stiffly, stared down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. My dad stood as I entered, offering me a hesitant smile. Olivia, glad you're here, he said, motioning toward the empty chair beside him. I gave a small nod and took my seat, my gaze flickering to Lily. Whatever this was, it had her rattled. I could see it in the way her fingers twisted together, the way she avoided my eyes. The silence stretched uncomfortably, no one quite sure how to start. Then, suddenly, Lily let out a shaky breath and broke down completely. Sobs racked her body as she buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently. The sound of her crying filled the room, raw and unrestrained. My mom gasped, immediately reaching for her, her voice laced with concern. Sweetheart, what's wrong? She placed a gentle hand on Lily's back, her expression filled with worry. My dad leaned forward, his brow creased with confusion. Lily, talk to us. What's going on? I didn't move. I didn't ask questions. I already knew. Watching her crumble under the weight of her own lies, I felt a strange, tangled mix of emotions. Anger, vindication, even pity. This was it. She was unraveling. I stayed silent, waiting. Through the hiccups of her sobs, Lily finally forced out words, her voice trembling yet loud enough to silence the room. I can't keep lying anymore, she choked out, tears streaming down her face. The room held its breath. The $10,000, she continued, her voice barely steady. It wasn't for me. It was Olivia. She's the one who left the money in the mailbox. Her confession hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. She inhaled shakily, trying to collect herself, but there was no stopping now. The words poured out in a rush, like she had been carrying them for too long. I took the credit because I wanted to feel more loved, more appreciated. Her voice cracked. I've never felt like I was in anyone's shadow, but Mom and Dad always protected me, always supported me, and I wanted more. She stole a glance at our parents, regret clear in her eyes. When I realized what Olivia had done, I was jealous. I wanted to be the one who did something big, something meaningful. Her voice wavered, barely above a whisper now. I didn't think about how much it would hurt her. I didn't think about what it would do to all of us. I just wanted to hold on to that feeling of being special. She turned toward me, her face pale, eyes full of shame. And when Olivia tried to tell the truth, I lied again. I panicked. I didn't want to lose the way you looked at me, she admitted, her gaze flickering back to our parents. I didn't want to lose being the one you were proud of. Her breath hitched, and then, finally, she met my eyes. I'm so sorry, Olivia, she whispered, voice breaking completely. You didn't deserve any of this. I was selfish. And I let it go too far. She broke down again, burying her face in her hands. The room fell into stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Her sobs filled the space Lily had so carefully crafted with her lies, the Olivier space that had once been filled with my family's unwavering belief in her. Now it was quiet, uncertainty thick in the air. I sat frozen in my chair, emotions colliding inside me like a storm. Anger, vindication, disbelief, sadness. Hearing her finally admit the truth, after all this time, should have felt like a victory. But it didn't. Instead, there was only a hollow ache in my chest, a reminder of everything her deception had cost me. My relationship with our parents, my place in the family, my peace of mind. And even now, even after her confession, I wasn't sure if any of that could ever be repaired. I glanced at my mom and dad, their expressions frozen in shock. Their eyes flickered between me and Lily as if struggling to process the weight of her confession. They looked utterly devastated, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for them. They had made their choice. They had believed her over me, dismissed me, painted me as the jealous troublemaker. And now, they were staring at the fallout of that decision. A part of me wanted to say, "I told you so," to throw their own words back at them. But I didn't. I stayed silent, letting Lily's words settle in the air, heavy and undeniable. This moment wasn't mine to take, it was hers. She had spent months weaving her lie, and now she was finally unraveling it. Still, as much as I wanted justice, I couldn't ignore the ache inside me. It had taken this long for her to tell the truth. This long for them to finally see me. The silence stretched until my mom finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Olivia, I don't even know what to say," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She blinked rapidly, her hands trembling slightly as they rested on the table. "We were so blind, so quick to assume you were just being jealous. We never even considered that you might have been telling the truth. And now I see just how unfair we were to you." My dad nodded slowly, his face pale, his expression hollowed out with guilt. "We should have listened, Olivia," he admitted. "We should have trusted you instead of shutting you down." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't believe we let this go on for so long. We doubted you when we should have stood by you." His gaze was raw with regret. "I'm so sorry for everything we said, for not believing you. You didn't deserve that, not from us." They looked wrecked, their remorse etched into every word, every trembling breath. My mom reached across the table, her voice barely holding together. "We let you down, sweetheart," she murmured. "And I don't know if we can ever make that right, but we are so sorry." Her voice broke. "Can you ever forgive us?" Their words should have brought me relief, should have given me some sense of comfort. But all I felt was exhaustion, a deep, lingering sadness that no apology could erase. They were sorry now, but the damage had already been done. I glanced toward my grandparents. The sadness on their faces was unmistakable. My grandmother pressed her lips into a thin line, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes misty as she looked down. Beside her, my grandfather slowly shook his head, disappointment weighing heavily in his expression. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. Their silence carried the weight of everything left unsaid. Days passed, and I couldn't shake the events of that night. Lily's confession. My parents' apologies. The way my grandparents had looked at me, a mixture of sorrow and regret. It all played on a loop in my mind, like a scene from a movie I couldn't shut off. And then, there was Lily. For the first time, I let myself see beyond my own anger. Beyond the betrayal. Yes, she had caused so much damage. But she was finally trying to take responsibility for it. And maybe, just maybe, she deserved the chance to fix it. Not through money, but through something else. After a lot of thought, I made a decision. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. She answered almost instantly. "Olivia?" I took a deep breath. "I've decided to help you," I said, my tone firm but steady. "But not in the way you're expecting." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I'm not handing you money, Lily," I clarified. "But I will help you figure out how to get back on track." We'll sit down, go over your finances, and put together a plan to fix this. But only if you're serious about it. Silence stretched for a moment. Then, quietly, she spoke. Okay, she whispered. Her voice sounded different. Softer, smaller. Okay, I want to try. It wasn't full forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. And for the first time, I felt something lift inside me, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. The anger, the hurt, it hadn't vanished overnight. But it no longer felt suffocating. I wasn't trapped by it anymore. I had stood my ground. I had found my voice. And I had taken control of my own peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally move forward. Not for them. Not for Lily. But for me. And that was enough.